The middle of Tenochtitlan had a sacred precinct, a square area like this. Here's the Great Pyramid, the Templo Mayor, humongous thing. Here's the skull rack in the middle and a ball court to play the ball game. It looks like a capital I whenever you see a ball court. A temple to Quetzalcoatl, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This right here in front of it is an important building, right there. It's dedicated to the wind god, and this is the Great Pyramid. Here's a early colonial drawing of it with the same concept, the skull rack and the ball court and the different buildings, and that shows blood coming down because the sacrifices did take place up on the top of the main temple, at the top of either one or the other of the two staircases. The part on the left was, oops, there's a view of the kind of a rendition of it in the water, so lots of causeways and canals, and these are fields where you're growing things. You know, they grew intensive agriculture there, but a great causeway to the main temple. And a lot of times you'll see it reconstructed as, you know, red and yellow, but they really think it was stuccoed white, and that you actually would see the trail of blood from previous sacrifices. It was meant to be publicly scary. So here's the important thing about that building in front of it, which was round, and the god is called Ehecatl. If you want to know, the wind god. It's an aspect of Quetzalcoatl. So, Ehecatl. The Aztec gods are more like a pantheon, but they are also shamanic. They're more of natural forces. You know, you've got thunder, and you've got the sun, and you've got this and this. And they can also combine features. So Quetzalcoatl can have, it's weird, he gets a kind of a duck bill when he is more of the aspect of wind. So it's really like a set of adjectives. It's not that Diana always has her bow, and only Diana has, is that correct, has a bow. It's like you could have a bow if you were being the hunting aspect of Athena. So it's just more fluid because shamanism doesn't have gods so much as it has spirits that you meet, and so don't make too close of a, this is the same as Apollo, this is the same as, because it's much more fluid than that. Recognize this guy with the big round eyes? The rain god, yeah. Here we're in central Mexico, so it would be Tlaloc. This side, the left side as you look at it, is dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god. That's what it's called here. And Tlaloc is very, very ancient. The Mexica did not make up the rain god, but they have captured the ancient god that everybody believes in, the most important one for the rainy season, and they put it on the top of their pyramid. The difference between a Mexica pyramid and a Maya, 2 temples on top, always 2. 2, 2, 2. And this one is for our friend Huitzilopochtli, just call him the patron. And he's really the war god. Call him the war god. He's on this side. His side was red, Tlaloc's side was blue. We don't have this whole building. What we have is like if you cut an onion, because the Spanish raised it, but we have all of the foundations. And it was rebuilt every single time by every single ruler. So there's 7 different versions, and it got bigger each time. Everybody, when they took office, they built on the same sacred spot. They buried the building before, or they absorbed it, really. It's more to think that I got the power of my mother. It's like wearing your mother's clothes, and then your daughter wears your mother's and your clothes, and everybody just keeps piling it on with the power, and it gets bigger and more grand, and more people can see the blood and the public spectacle. So what's fascinating in terms of, so this is one of the few pictures of Huitzilopochtli. His name means the hummingbird of the south, and we don't quite know why. But if you do see an image, it will usually have a long beak. It's like his head is inside of the long pointy beak of a hummingbird. And hummingbirds are pretty nasty little birds, right? They're always fighting each other. They're very bellicose. So we think, oh, they're so pretty and sparkly. No, they're mean little suckers. So that's their patron, is this hummingbird. So what have they done? They have placed this building and this building in relation to each other, and this is on the equinox, not the solstice, equinox, the day of even day and light that happens twice a year. Twice a year, 2 seasons. Tlaloc, rainy season. You don't do war when it's raining. You do it when it's dry. So the sun comes up. They arranged. The sun doesn't do this. The people put their building so that they would see when they stood on this platform here, in between on the equinox, and it's on this side of the sky during the rainy season, and it comes to here, and it's on this side during the dry season. It's a calendar. I know, and this isn't easy to do. Get your students to say, well, what if I asked you to set up a building or set up something at the school, and to know exactly, yeah, with a solar alignment for the first day of school. I want the sun on the first day of school to hit that spiral over there, the center of that spiral. And you're like,
how do they do that? Like, my kids ask me all about that all the time. They're like, how do they know?
how do they know?
They
They watch the sky. Naked eye astronomy. If you want to read anybody about that, Aveni, Anthony Aveni, A-V-E-N-I. He writes very, accessibly about the astronomical alignments. A-V-E-N-I. He has 10 or 12 books. He's actually a wonderful speaker. He's retired, but if you wanted, anyway, love Tony Aveni. Why do I keep doing that?
After the fact at your schools to look at the place the sun does rise on the equinox.
You basically have to do it year after year. You have to watch, and you
they
use.
have to watch for several years before they can even begin construction.
Yeah, you don't just do it. It just doesn't happen. You have to be, and if you have a nice, there are volcanoes, Popocatépetl and the other one, big giant volcanoes right around. And you're pretty much ringed with mountains. This is the Valley of Mexico, 7,000 feet of altitude, very rich at the time, not anymore, we've depleted it. But you have nice silhouette to help you use nature to tell you about nature's time. And you keep watching the patterns. And there were people who were specialists. They were priests of the calendar. And they dedicated themselves. They watched the Pleiades, they watched the Venus as the morning star and the evening star, which you have to watch Venus for 8 years. 8 years. And then probably recheck yourself again for the next 8 years. And
why this preoccupied, like, why were they so preoccupied with these things? Is it because of their...
I would say that the sky is orderly, and it is something that correlates like when you should plant. You know, agricultural. Do you know why you should plant on the new moon? Why things grow better if you plant on the new moon?
No. Why?
The moon sucks water, it rules tides and things like that. When it's in its new moon phase, water is closer to the surface. You put a seed in and it'll germinate. So it's not an old wives' tale. It is ecological. So the new moon is the beginning, and the full moon is like, you don't plant anything. Don't plant on the full moon. You have babies on the full moon. It pulls water. It seems to pull women's water, amniotic fluid. You ask any nurse what happens on the full moon in the hospital. So it's naked eye astronomy. That's really important. They did not have telescopes. They didn't, So all of our stuff that is based on calibrations and things using technology is irrelevant. It's naked eye astronomy.
Which
and
book by Anthony Aveni would you recommend? There's so many.
Sky Watchers.
Okay.
Sky Watchers is a good one. And it would make a great project for a kid,
Well, I like the idea of putting your school mascot on the place where the sun hits, like the solstice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Power to the students, and power to their symbol.
Right.
Plus
Yeah.
they're watching for the solstice and being much more aware.
More aware. Even if you could just get them once a week to say, where's the sunrise
When you
from
see
a
those
week ago?
pictures, like
Because
when
you
they
won't
take a
see much
picture
difference.
And it's an ellipse with the sun. If you take a picture in the same spot every week for a year,
Mhm.
it's that ellipse. It's
Mhm.
sort of a little, almost infinity symbol.
Actually, a lot of the metaphors are of weaving, that the sun is weaving back and forth, you know, going this way, back and forth, across the sky. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this is I call it an Olmec style mask. We don't know if it's Olmec or it's a Mexica very good version of one. There's some things, you can't go into it for this level, but there are some things that are a little bit odd about it, but it was found in situ, so these are archaeologically excavated. They took down an entire block of downtown Mexico City. When they found, in 1978, they were digging around and they found the edge of the Coyolxauhqui stone that we'll talk about, and they said, oh my God, you know, this is where the Templo Mayor was. And they took down a whole block of colonial buildings right next to the Zócalo, the main square, and the National Cathedral. And that was a pretty big commitment to do that. And so this is an offering. There are at least 7,000, and they keep finding more, at least 7,000 objects that are in caches. See, this is a cross-section, and these are like little boxes under the ground with different layers of stuff, just seashells and jaguar skeletons and crocodile skeletons and artwork from different people that they conquered, but also they didn't conquer the Olmec. The Olmec were gone by 1,000 years. Somehow they either made this or collected this. And I think it's easier for this level just to say that it's Olmec and that they knew it was old and that they were collectors. This also, they valued things from the past and from all levels of the world and natural and human-made. This was meant to be a statement where they put all that stuff under. It's like a dedication to a building. You might put something, have your little time thing, or you have the cornerstone that you put your name on. It's that same. It sanctifies the building, but in a shamanic worldview, you have all the power of all that stuff. And everybody kept putting more and more, each king,
So
more and more stuff.
would do his own cache as he's building his own.
Yeah, because it went out this way, so you'd have some ground to go into for a cache. So the caches are kind of, they go out, you know, like that. So it's a whole microcosm of the cosmos. You've got the underworld with all this stuff, and then the temple itself is the terrestrial, and it's going up into the celestial. And so here are some of the other stuff, a lot of stuff from the sea, because the underworld is watery. But they're not near the sea. Mexico City's nowhere near the sea. They're on a lake full of algae, full of fish, full of richness. So a spondylus shell, the spiny oyster shell, it's bright orange, very highly prized. Here's a whole crocodile, here's a jaguar skull, some coral, really collecting the whole world. So that's another thing about the New World, that they were conscious of past, even if they were cyclical and you think of them as living in the present. But they knew, in many instances, what came before them, and they wanted to just keep building from the present and the future on top of the past. It's all a continuum, so that's also a cyclical way of thinking. It's an overlay, you know, it's not, I'm doing this, like you said, I'm going to build myself a temple over here that's completely different from yours. That would be the Maya, but it's still in a sacred area related to the solstice sun. So the Olmec were here in the Gulf Coast, in the Bend. The Aztecs were the center, Tenochtitlan is here, but they conquered out. And this is where the Mexica, the Aztecs, had a colony way down here near the chocolate and everything. But the Olmecs are in this part of the world around the first millennia BCE is there, from like 1200 to about 300. The colossal heads, if you've ever seen them, The first one was found because it was buried, and the archaeologist Matthew Sterling was walking along, and one giant eye, about this big, had been eroded out and was looking at him. Yeah, so that's the scale, 8 feet, 9 feet tall. This same style with these heavy epicanthic folds, that's the Asian genetics. There's still plenty of Mexican people who have an epicanthic fold. It's not rocket science. And you'll get this if you talk about the Olmec heads. I don't know if you will out here in Utah, probably not, but there's a strong group of people who want them to be Africans, who want this to be evidence of Africans in the Americas, based, I think, on a racist notion that if you have full lips and a wide nose that you are African. There's no connection. I'm sorry. It was a look. It's the fat, you know, nice and fat. And also, these are giant boulders that were dragged along, and you couldn't have like a big pointy out nose, or you'd break it off. So that the features are Asian related and high status jowls and physiognomy. This is what they liked their people to look like the Romans liked them to, you know.
Yeah, 'cause who's to say that they all looked like this, right?
No, it could be very, very idealized. We can't spend any more time on them. I was showing you some other monument. You can look it up if you want. La Venta Offering 4. It's a little group of men under the ground. This is a cache under the ground. They're all having a ceremony, probably an initiation ceremony. If you read Art of Mesoamerica, Mary Miller, the one I recommended, you can read about this. But there's a lot going on under the ground. And that's something that has always been true in Mesoamerica. So I'm kind of grasping for that tradition and change concept that's hard to do with this material because they didn't give me enough monuments. But there's a whole world down there, and there are rituals and things that are taking place through these little figurines, like what we were talking about, the Tlatilco figurine with the 2 heads and the ritual stuff where spirits inhabit the little people. So there's the Templo Mayor reconstruction and the calendar stone and the Coyle Shauki stone. So you recognize this guy. This is the one that is what they found in 1978 that started them going. And the museum has a wonderful way, because it was at the bottom of the stairs on the Huitzilopochtli side. She was right down here. And most people believe that the calendar stone was flat, like a pavement, on the top of the Huitzilopochtli side, which should be painted red. I don't know why it's painted blue. Up here at the top of the stairs. So you went from probably being sacrificed on top of the calendar stone and falling down with your heart ripped out and your blood everywhere, falling down and landing on the Coyle Shauki stone. So they're circular monuments, cyclical, circular. There's 2 of them. You go from one to the other as you're dying or dead. And she is dismembered. All these little scallops are where her head's been cut off, her arms have been cut off, her legs have been cut off. And so you are the sacrificial victim is like her.
Does that go with the story too, because she tumbled down the hill?
Mm-hmm.
She was mad at her mom for getting pregnant and having a ball of yarn laying in her lap. And so she sent her 400 brothers and sisters to go and kill her mom. And then
Yep.
she unfortunately said, no you don't, and killed her, chopped her up, and she went tumbling down the mountainside.
Yeah, in a nutshell. Did you get that? It's a story of when they were migrating and they came to this hill, and there was a woman, Coyle Shauki, whose mother was a priestess in the temple at the top. And the mother, Coatlicue, I wish we had had enough room in the snake skirt. The other monument, if you want to tell the story with monuments, or it's a great one to bring in a open-ended. Coat is in there, snake, and that's skirt and temple. Q is also temple. Snake temple, snake skirt. That's her mother. And a little, actually it's supposed to be a little feather, went down her cleavage as she was sweeping. And so bird, because Huitzilopochtli is her son, she's the mother of Huitzilopochtli, and her son has a bird spirit. So it comes from a ball of down, and she's magically impregnated. So it's kind of like Virgin Mary. And the children, Coatlicue is the only daughter, and then the 400 brothers, 400 is like a whole lot to them. It's a vigesimal system, 20 fingers and toes, so 400 is 20 times 20. So it's like, we would say 1,000, but that's in the decimal system. So 400 is just a whole bunch. She had a whole bunch of brothers and just her, and of course she's the one to blame. She's the evil female. As the Mexica are not very positive towards the female principle. The earth is a devouring earth, and Coyolxauhqui is the evil sister, because she doesn't like her mother being pregnant. She shouldn't have gotten pregnant. She should have been a celibate priestess. So she cuts her mother's head off, and out of the mother's head springs Huitzilopochtli. It's very much like Athena coming out of the thigh of Zeus. So you can do that if you want to, except, the genders are different. So Huitzilopochtli is born from his mother's death. A lot of women die in childbirth. And in the Mexica, if a woman died in childbirth, she automatically went to the celestial realm. Because you want to increase people having babies. And it was women's war. Childbirth is women's war. So she was the brave mother who died in childbirth. But Coyolxauhqui was the one who killed her. And she shouldn't kill her. She should have let her give birth to Huitzilopochtli. Anyway, so Huitzilopochtli takes revenge on his sister, throws her down the mountain, cuts her up, dismembers her, and throws her down Snake Mountain. This is supposed to have happened on the way to them coming to their world. So it's something in their political history. I think it has a political aspect. Definitely patriarchal. The masculine principle is going to overcome. All the rulers are men. There's no women rulers. There's no, none of that. And I think it's, some people who were rebellious or something. It's sort of metaphoric, like if you mess with us, if you mess with Huitzilopochtli, you're going to get sacrificed. But that's what this sacrifice is, a reenactment. And see, she has bare breasts. That's considered very humiliating. That is like you're stripped of your clothing. It's not sexy. It is, you are the total victim. You take men's clothes off. They're naked and they're vulnerable and they don't have their finery. And that's, so basically the dismemberment, and see the tops of the bones are peeking out, the top of your arm bone, the top of your thigh bone, those two little bumps. So they're kind of, what's wonderful about the Mexica style, the monumental, or what's it called, the central main style. I'll think of what the word is they use for it. It's sometimes zeroes in and is very precise and detailed. What does the top of your femur look like? Look at her. What else do you see that's...
Socket.
Yeah, the socket. What else is kind of very anatomical suddenly in the midst of something very mythical? And what details do you see? She's fat. That's good, right? Plump. She was fertile. She was young and fertile. She had a little roll of fat, right? What about her hands? Can you see the little lines on the insides of your fingers and your palm? She's got a lifeline. I think she has, you can't see it in this one. She has a lifeline and everything. They'll zero in on stuff, exactly how her belt was tied. See that tie? You can tell what knot it is, even though the tie ends in snakeheads. So I have it in my guide, use the poetry that we have left. We have Aztec lyric poetry left. And you've got to have them read a poem or two because they talk about art. There are poems about art. The ceramic artist teaches the clay to lie.
Sounds like Picasso.
Makes it look like something else. Teaches the clay to lie. You'd like that if you teach ceramics. The whole poem on the ceramics. He humanizes the desires of the people, like makes them into, you know, from their deepest desire. It's philosophical. It's an aesthetic system. It's very sophisticated. The person to read on that is Miguel León Portilla. Again, he has lots of books. It's hyphenated, León Portilla. There are some poems by a woman poet, too. So if you want to bring in your female stuff, and you can analyze them, and oh, they're wonderful. They're wonderful. Okay, so that's the Coil Shalki stone. Let's go back. You want to eat? What do you want to do? Are we dead? Or do we want to
get through the
Can we-
text before we break?
It would. If I'll do the calendar as quick.
We could always start eating and bring food back in here and eat while you're talking.
Yeah, because I
And
haven't
you
done
can
the
eat.
I haven't done the Andes yet. So this is, you know, the cliche monument, the Mona Lisa, the everything of, and it's on every ashtray and, you know, T-shirt in the world. But it really is important. It's a really, really, it's really important monument. It was buried, and the Coatlicue, which is the picture of the mother, Huitzilopochtli's mother, the giant sculpture of her. They were buried and found under the main square in 1790 during the Enlightenment. Very interesting story if you want to do sort of what happens to monuments. The calendar stone is great for that because it was chipped out. You can see the background that's lower down and it's chipped out. That's why we think it was a pavement. And it had a wider part, and then they were quickly trying to save it. They chipped it out and they buried it. And the Spanish didn't find it. Nobody found it till 1790, which was good because the Enlightenment, they were more ready to see it, right? They were not going to just destroy it because it was an evil pagan thing. They were going to look at it scientifically during the Enlightenment. So you could bring in, what's that painting where they're doing surgery? There's one. Isn't that about the right time? 1790, you have? Yeah. Anyway.
16, that's about, but it's still age of.
Age of Enlightenment, you know, or bring in something else that's a little better, but what is
That's
the date?
orrery.
Yeah, the orrery,
That's 1763 to 1765.
That's close enough for me.
Yeah, that's within the generation.
Yeah. So when they discovered it, they were like, wow, this is really cool. It looks like writing, and they saw it as a document with a lot of information in it. They put it on the side of the National Cathedral. They mounted it on the wall. There's a picture, there's an image of that you can find probably on the internet. It's a black and white photo. If you can't, call me and I'll send you mine. But
so mounted on the wall of what?
the National Cathedral. So the Templo Mayor is here, like the onion skin of all those things. The National Theater is here. The Zocalo is enormous. National Cathedral, not theater. And they put the calendar stone, not in the front, but around this side on there. And because they elevated it, because they were already ready. You know, they're getting mad at the Spanish. It was about to be over, independence in the 1820s. And so they were like, this is our heritage, and it shows something. You know, looks like a sun, and there's a face, so they always called it the sunstone. The Coatlicue is scary. It's
You leave, so temple, did you say theater?
No, I didn't mean to. The National Cathedral that the Spanish built.
What's this big square?
The Zocalo, the main square itself.
Main
And they found, I don't know exactly where they found the calendar stone, but it would be buried, you know, buried under the pavement, those two giant monuments. I mean, and tons, weighed tons and tons.
How far
The
is the
outside.
National Cathedral from Temple Mayor?
Not far at all. There may be, I think, only one big street in between the two. So the Spanish didn't, Normally, they would have put it right on top, like in Cuzco.
Across the street.
Yes. But they were still claiming this is the center of the sacred precinct, so people are still going to come here to do sacred stuff. They've just changed the rules as to what you do that's sacred. But the
cathedral, that they
yeah,
call this
the cathedral, right. And you can see the wear on the center of the face. Can you see that there's not much of a nose left? That's what indicates to us that they were doing, you know, some cutting and pasting of human beings on top of it. It was also painted. You can find the reconstruction of how it looked. Very colorful. I don't think I have that.
On this,
I think
that's why
so.
it's rubbed away.
That's why it has
Where's the sculpture
Koyol Shauki at the bottom of the stairs.
the other one? Her mom.
Coatlicue was probably inside the temple because she was the mother of Huitzilopochtli. So she would have been erected inside the temple to him on that side. It's not in the 250. I should have brought it to you. I can find it on the internet and I'll show her to you, but we have to get through the Andes and other stuff. But there's a description by some of the conquistadors of a big, that sounds like her and covered with blood, like you would take the sacrificial blood and wipe it all over her, like some of the African pieces. There's a Nkisi, yeah, that they would do the same thing to that. Brightly colored in red and green and painted all over, gaudy, same as the Parthenon was very gaudy, you know, and all that stuff. This is just to show you how complicated the monument is, not that I'm going to go through all of that. That's like the London Tube of the Maya. It has numbers. Numbers are pretty simple in the Aztec. You have 1, dot for 1, 2, 3, 4. When you get to 5, you have different kinds of banners. 400, 200, 400, 8,000 is this is one of those obsidian clubs, is their highest. And then this is a little incense bag that also can represent the numbers. In the middle, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 big dots. You also have one down here, but that relates to that. These 4 dots are the 4 eras of time that came before the present era. And each one of them was destroyed in cyclical thinking. Each one, it was sort of, they didn't work, so they were destroyed. One was destroyed by jaguars, and one by wind, and so on. And this era that just ended in 2007 is the 5th era, and all of these are the 4 eras before. There's the jaguars and the wind and rain and floods, something like that. This shape right here is the shape of the glyph for the 5th era. The 5th era is the era of movement. It was supposed to end in the shaking earth. It was supposed to be an earthquake. There's a lot of earthquakes around Popocatépetl and all that. Well, it didn't. The face in the middle, you will find a lot of different crap on the internet and in different places. It may have aspects of the sun, but it is almost entirely the devouring earth. So those are 2 hands with claws. Can you see them going like this? Clawed hands. And the face in the middle is the earth herself who cries out at night for blood. We're standing on her face and her claws, so it's like if I'm the surface of the earth.
The sacrifice or something.
Yeah, I want the blood, and I'm going to take you.
And would have been scary to them, or just kind of this is,
Well, pretty scary.
yeah.
You got to feed her.
Yeah.
You've got to feed this woman. So there's lots of images on the bottom of others of the devouring earth with her clawed hands holding skeletons and stuff. And her tongue is a flint knife. Well, it's worn off mostly on the calendar stone, but it looks like a big, like coming down out of the mouth right there, the tongue. But it's a flint knife. They were made out of flint, as the name implies. They were, napped, thank you. They would often put a face on them like that, or something, or a pattern on them, and they would use them they could be one way that they killed you, or they took your head off, or something like that. So her tongue is a flint knife. She is going to cut you and get your blood, and she's going to grab you with her claws. She's the devouring earth. She's also in a parturition pose. That means childbirth. Women squat in the world, when they give birth. So she's Mother Earth, but she wants blood. She is not a very positive one. You can.
On the actual calendar stone, you just see the face. But in
And
this
the claws.
And the claws. And then in the other images, you actually see like
You see the
squatty
whole
body.
face, the whole body, and that's under the earth in the underworld. And she's giving birth to everything that's going to grow, but only if she gets the blood. The blood, the rain. She gets the rain, she grows. Blood from sacrifice. Here are these flint knives. I forgot I showed you them. Here's her mouth with the little face and the teeth. They put teeth on the flint knife. And this is a human skull that they've added flint knives for. That, yeah, nice, very nice. And they will also put beautiful turquoise mosaic all over human skulls. It's beautiful. It's beautiful and elegant and scary all at the same time. It's very good for an imperial style that's really bellicose. And I guess the Romans probably are the ones you might end up talking to them. You'll have to read this, but the ritual calendar is 260 days. The average human gestation is 266. So it's a calendar of childbirth. And they would have been a little bit shorter then. They didn't, their gestation, because there wasn't as good feeding, wasn't as good nutrition. So the calendar, the ritual calendar, you are conceived on the same day that you are born, 9 months later, in the way they've counted it. So you've already completed a cycle. You don't just start and keep going in one direction. You're born on the day you were conceived. Not probably absolutely, but in general. So you can read that. That's a little more detail. You're named after your birthday, and you're named after your birthday. So I would be 13 Rain, which wasn't a particularly good day in astrology. Lots of challenges. But your parents could cheat and name you after the next day. And I think they would have named me One Flower, which is the next day. And under the sign of flower are artistic types. So that's what I choose to be, One Flower. What it is you have these 20 symbols, and it's not months or anything. This is the 365 has months. It has 18 months of 20 days each and 5 leftover days. 18 times 20 is 360 plus 5. They made it more, we have ours 29 days, 31 days, 30 days, all that craziness. They made it as regular as they could for the solar calendar. For this calendar, they have 13 numbers, so you have to envision it like 2 cogs, 1 through 13, and 20 different symbols. So you could be born on, this is one house. That person was conceived on one house and born on one house. And it goes 2, whatever, the next monkey, 3, this, 4, this, and you start the numbers over again, but you're still in the symbols. And it takes 260 days, 13 times 20, to get back to one house. And it just keeps going, through time. It's like us saying, leaving off the year and saying it's December 25th. It's always the same December 25th. It doesn't matter that it's 1976 or 2012. It's just December 25th. It's just one house. And each one has what its character is. So like the 13 Rain and the One Flower. And it's fun for kids to look this up on that Aztec. Well, the best one is azteccalendar.com. Don't do the other ones. And remember, 2 C's, the Aztec and the calendar.com. They make it very easy. You just plug in your birthday. But they do show you the many different things that are going on. The only problem is it kind of conflates the Maya and the Aztec a bit. But what can you do? So I would, one of my names would be 13 Rain, and then I would probably have another name of Professor Person or, whatever. You could get lots and lots of different names. You would gather them during your life.
With what you do in your life or what?
Yeah. So the reason this is important, that's the explanation of the solar calendar, is that the 20-day signs are around this, all around here. Crocodile is the first one, and do not, pet peeve of mine, they're not alligators. Alligators are in Florida and above. They're all crocodilians, but they are caiman, basically. We ought to say caiman. That's the dominant type of crocodile in this area, and they're not alligators. It's just annoys me. It's like calling a moose an elk, It's just, they're close, but no cigar. So we've got devouring in this sign of the 5th era, that you better keep sacrificing or the 5th era will end in earthquake. These are the cardinal points and the intercardinal points, and also make a sun diadem. So it does represent the solar year by just the sun and the directions. And in ancient American, all these people's thought time is the same as space. Just like in quantum physics, time and space are the same. So you go to the east, that's where the sun starts. So it starts in its time of going around in that spot. The time and the space are the same. Sunrise east. Movement. You got to wrap your mind around it, but this is the sun and the directions, because the sun helps you tell where you are, north and south, noon, and all that kind of stuff. You look at the sun. Here's the little quincunxes, the little 5 dots for the cosmos and for preciousness here. And these are 2 giant snakes. You should recognize the same from the Maya piece with the upturned mouth to show, how they can unlock their jaws. This is the sun is carried by a giant snake during the day in the sky and during the night in the underworld. Carried by a snake. And there are people, faces coming out of this. It's not a really quick and dirty explanation for that. Except I think it's related also to snake molting. I think it's like there's people inside the snake. There's your different, your animal aspect and your human aspect, and they're eating and regurgitating. There's a lot there.
The snake symbol here is very positive.
Very positive, yeah.
Another opposition to the.
It's not twining around the tree trying to trick you. It's there to show you how to keep growing and prosper.
Mesoamerica, Gilgamesh, the snake takes away eternal life.
Yeah.
But here the snake keeps the world going.
Snake is good. We like snakes. I hate snakes, but they like snakes. So the coil Shalki stone, like I said, if this is the bottom of the stairway right there in the middle, this was where they found it with offerings and caches. And there was an earlier version of it. One of the earlier kings made one. It's ugly, not nice. But this one is from one of the very later kings, and we talked about the story. And then I would go back and revisit this briefly in relation to the calendar stone. It was, I think it was shown as one of your test essays. So we've used up the question, because it was a really good question about, you have the calendar stone and this, what major event happened in between the conquest by the Spanish and the time. Yeah. So, and the idea of time. So you have to understand that the calendar stone is not a working calendar. You can't do the 1, crocodile, 2, house, that stuff. It just has all of the symbols for all of the types of time. The eras that are over, the present era, the sun, the directions, the sun serpents that are taking it around and around. It combines the 2 calendars, and they're all just, and the main message of it is apocalyptic. So one of the, I should go back to it, is if you don't, it's threat. If you don't sacrifice to the devouring earth, then the 5th era might be the last one. and the circle of the sacred signs, you know, got to keep it going, got to keep it going, and this is how you do it. And that's based not just on being mean and bloodthirsty. It's a big, giant myth that most everybody in Mesoamerica subscribed to, that the final creation that worked was because gods went down in the underworld and did penis bloodletting onto bones or onto cornmeal or both, and finally created humans from corn bones and blood. And they sacrificed themselves. The god sacrificed itself. It's funny because it's a little guy. It's not really so much a god. He's sort of a little pitiful guy who does this. It's an interesting story if you want to look up the creation story itself. And then people emerge up out of the underworld. So we owe the spirit beings blood. They gave it to us, we owe it back. It's just a reciprocity thing. Now, it can be used for political reasons, you know. Whose blood am I going to take? I'm going to take yours because I want your coffee, your chocolate, and I want your quetzal feathers. So you get to be sacrificed. Aren't you lucky? Okay, so I would go back, but one of the interesting things is if you contrast, it's on a book page, a square page, which is European. It's a European type shape. And bound at one side is a codex, is a book that's European. That's one of the reasons we know it's not pre-Hispanic. In the ancient books, you did have books. They were like a giant accordion. They could spread out 30 feet. They were an accordion called a screen fold. Screen fold, you just fold it up. And look at how time goes around. It goes around the edges, but it just sort of stops here and leaves this big gap. You don't have any gaps in the calendar stone. Even though they're trying to make the time go around the edge of the page, it's not the same message of continuous circular. The calendar stone, you could practically roll it, you know, and you'd get the days going round and round.